All right, welcome back into Cleveland Browns Daily, the Joe Thomas half hour of the program. It goes in the books 32-13. The Browns limp into the bye week off of a loss. Historical individual performance for Myles Garrett. And I wanted to start there with you, Hoff. When you were on teams that struggled and you were having individually excellent gold jacket seasons, how did you manage your personal performance juxtaposed to your team's struggles?
Well, it was really difficult for me, and I've talked about it at length a few times where in my 10th season, playing really good football, being on a team that ended up going 1-15, and you continue to like build up this narrative in your head that, okay, this is the week we're going to turn it around, we're going to put it together. And I think that everybody kind of has that breaking point. You know, some guys it takes longer to get to, but after we played the Patriots in my 10th season, I kind of had this moment where I just broke down in the car driving home with Annie, and I was crying. I couldn't help myself. And I had actually played what on paper was almost a perfect game. You know, I didn't have any minuses. Every step I took, every eye placement I had, every hand placement I had, everything I did was perfect, and we got blown out. And it's that feeling of loss of control where you feel like you've been kind of fooling yourself, talking yourself into being able to go out and win and keep the games competitive, and that you have impact on the outcome. And it was that moment where I just kind of had that breakdown, realizing that like I had been kind of fooling myself and that I don't have the impact on the game that I want. And I had a chance to talk with some of the Browns psychologists and kind of help me get my mind put back together and be comfortable still performing at a high level, still trying to give everything I have to be the best player that I can be, but also realizing that, you know what, I don't control everything, and I have to be able to give some of that control up, understanding that maybe the outcome on the scoreboard won't reflect necessarily the performance that I put in. And that's a really difficult thing for an athlete, for a leader, for a football player to be able to comprehend and still be able to put out their best performance. And I think we saw a little bit of that from Myles in this game over the weekend, because he was slamming his helmet down. He was frustrated, feeling that, you know what, I had 5 sacks in this game. I had a forced fumble. I had 6 tackles. What else can I do? And we're still getting blown out. And for a defensive player, it's got to be even more difficult than for me when I was an offensive lineman, because I get that as a lineman, I can only block the guy that's across from me. But typically on defense, especially a pass rusher, you feel like you have more impact on the outcome of a game because I can get to the quarterback. I can knock the football loose. I can make big turnover-worthy plays. I can get the ball back to my offense. And to feel like you've done everything that you possibly can and the game still isn't even close, that's a really difficult thing mentally. And you could hear from the comments that Myles had after the game that he's struggling with those same things. And so, you know, you hope that he's got somebody in his life that he can talk to, because really how I was able to get over it was honestly just talking to people that are important in my life, talking to my wife, talking a little bit to some of my parents, some of my close friends that were on the team, talking to the psychologist with the Browns, and just that ability to talk and just kind of let some of that emotion out allowed me to steer myself back and focus on, all right, it's okay. I need to focus on me being the best version of myself and do everything I can to be a great servant to help my teammates, but understanding that, you know what, even if I do everything I possibly can, it might not lead to a victory. And being able to sort of separate that emotion from what I need to do to be the best version of myself, to fulfill my contract, to make my teammates in a best position possible that they can to succeed, give the fans everything that they deserve, but understanding that there is a dislocation between my performance and the performance of the team, and still finding a way to motivate yourself. It's really, really difficult. And you hope that Myles has those people in his life so he is able to continue to motivate himself so we can continue to get the performances that we got from him over the weekend. But I think the best thing that will help him is to have a little bit better offensive performance so that he can feel like I do have impact on the game. Because I've said this in the past, defensive players, they have to give a lot more than an offensive player does from an effort and an energy standpoint on each play, because you have to sprint to the ball. Not only do you have to beat your man up front, but then when the ball goes downfield, you've got to sprint to that ball with everything you have. You have to play with a different level of emotion, with your hair on fire, than an offensive player who plays much more under control. It's much more measured violence than it is from a defensive player that has to have that little bit of unglued, unhinged mentality in his brain to be able to go out and play. And so finding that why for him, I think, is going to be really important moving forward so we can continue to see that great effort.
Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, what he's doing. Last year he led the league with 22 tackles for a loss, and he's got 15 already this season. I mean, that is wild to me, the way that he's performing. You mentioned kind of the offense. Were you ever on a team where there was all of a sudden some, resentment one side of the ball to the other? Because at some point, they gave up 9 points in the first half, and then they end up getting blown out. It's kind of the same thing. Gave up 10 points in the first half in Baltimore. And, even in Detroit, you played well defensively early on in that game. How do you keep that from happening? Because I would imagine at some point it's like, we're out here, to your point, killing ourselves. We're performing at a high level. We were, the number one defense in the league prior to last week, and we're still getting blown out.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. I think I have been on those teams where the defense is coming off the field because they made a stop and they're giving you dirty looks, and when you're going on the field, you go out, you get a 3 and out, and you're jogging off, and the punt team's coming on, and you see the defense standing over there. They're still exhausted from the last drive because they were just on the field 3 or 4 minutes ago, and you go 3 and out, and they're worn out thinking, hey, man, we're giving everything we got. We're getting stops. We're getting you the ball back. Give us a little chance to regroup, catch our breath on the sideline. And it's difficult to balance that because really the only thing that can improve that feeling, that relationship between offense and defenses is if the offense goes out and does their job better. And it can get ugly at times, but I think that's where leadership within the defensive room, starting from where the defensive coordinator gives that message of, guys, we need to worry about who we are. And I think one of the things that they can point to is those rankings. And, we all want to talk about it's a team game. You shouldn't worry about statistics and stuff. But when you feel like your offense isn't pulling their weight, what are the things that you can get your guys motivated with? It's, hey, we have pride because we're the number one defense or we're a top 5 defense. These are the goals that we have. And those are the things that you want to try to achieve and that you want to try to harp on. And it's really important, I think, for the leaders, the players, and defensive coaches to really make sure that they try to nip that in the bud as quickly as they can so that they don't allow it to become more of a thing where it's offense versus defense. It's defense worrying about what the offense is doing and getting pissed off at them because they're not holding up their end of the bargain, because that's obviously a dangerous dynamic. And on top of that, you do have this great defense that you don't want them focusing their energy on what the offense is doing and worrying about how poorly they're performing and having this grudge against those guys, because then it's going to take away from what they have to do and the focus that they need to go out and to continue to play great football there on defense.
It illustrates everything Hoff's just saying there, folks out there listening. It illustrates just how difficult it can be at times to be a professional athlete, right? Because what we want out of all of you is we want you to win. We want you to be great teammates. We want you to put team above all. But in the meantime, sometimes all you can hang on to amidst struggles is personal, individual success
and goals.
And that goes against everything that we're taught team sports are supposed to be about. But what do you expect them to do? You have to find your joy somewhere. You have to find your individual success somewhere amidst team failure. And it's a brutal ask.
You can only control what you can control.
That's it.
You can't play offense.
No.
Yeah, you got to find the why, right? And for a defensive player, it's easy to say the why is winning, but when it's pretty obvious that you don't have the makeup to be able to win, and let's say you're playing the game like last weekend, it's 2 or 3 score difference in the game already. If you're saying, yeah, I'm going out and playing hard because I want to win, it's like, okay, well, that's not really realistic. Anybody who's played sports knows that the comeback ain't happening right now. Mm-hmm. So what am I doing to go out on that field and telling myself that gives me the best chance to give everything I have on every play? And you know what? Sometimes that is individual accomplishments, individual statistics, team from a defensive team standpoint of rankings, right? Those are the things we have pride in. We can hold that up and say, this is what we're fighting for right now. And you hope that maybe next week the offense figures it out. It's a closer game. You feel like maybe that's our why right now. But if that's not that why in the moment is winning as a team, well, let's win as a defense. And that is looking at the statistics, looking at the individual statistics, looking at my own grade sheet, right? For me, that was a lot of things that I focused on towards the end of my career, going, 1-15 and then 0-16 my last 2 years. It's like me versus my grade sheet. That's my evaluation. That's what I go out there and I play for, is to try to be perfect every single week, because I know if I do that, I've given my teammates around me the best chance of success. And then it's up to them to hold up their end of the bargain. And if they don't, I can't get so worried about what they're doing, because it's only going to affect me negatively.
Yeah. And you go into this bye week now, and obviously we haven't just come out and said it, but we know the offense of the Cleveland Browns is struggling. What have you seen, and are you surprised that, we're, in many cases, I guess you'd say, we are staying the course in terms of what we're doing at the quarterback position and offensively?
Well, I think you heard some of the frustration from Wyatt after the game. You kind of heard him talking about not being able to throw the football down the field, not threatening a defense deep. And I would say, as they're self-scouting, it's not like this is some great revelation. Like, we haven't thrown the ball down the field. We haven't been able to hit our receivers. But you can sense some of that frustration bubbling up amongst the offense, amongst the receivers, amongst the linemen in the running game, because it's hard to have a consistently good running game if you aren't able to push the ball down the field. And now, certainly, it's not without blame on the offensive line for not doing a better job blocking in the run game or in some of the passing game situations, but just being able to have a few shots down the field to successfully get explosive plays, I think, is going to be so important to find a way to get those moving forward after this bye week. Because if we're never going to be able to push the ball down the field, we're never hitting our receivers down the field, then what you're going to have is receivers that don't want to give that full effort, right? They don't want to be running for the love of the game, go routes all game long if they're not even getting looked at. Just the same way that the offensive line is feeling like sometimes they're running their head into the wall when you have extra safeties and you've got different defenses that are putting more guys in the box to take away your run game, because they're not worried about the ball getting thrown over the top of their heads. And so I think from an offensive standpoint, figuring out who or what that looks like to be able to push the ball and to be able to hit explosive plays in the passing game is going to be so important moving forward coming out of this bye week.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to lean on Billy Musgrave. You got to lean on guys who have been there. I mean, because it's this quarterback room. I mean, it's got to be the youngest in the league. It has to be. I mean, Tennessee's is really young too, but Cam Ward was the number one pick in the draft. This isn't that situation. We got a third-round pick, a fifth-round pick, and Bailey Zappi. That's the room. So there isn't a veteran that can come in and be like, all right, let's just stabilize this a little bit. And so the solution is going to have to come from within, and you're just going to have to rely on Kevin and Billy and hope that they can find some sort of answer to all of this. But all of it marries, doesn't it, Hoff? I mean, we don't protect particularly well. We don't separate very well at receiver. And so and then schematically, everything is really underneath. Z had a great line yesterday. He said, look, it feels like we play the whole game in the red zone. Yeah. That's basically what these games feel like.
Which is so hard. We always talk about how difficult it is when you get into the red zone. You have to run the ball because the windows are so tight. And for a young quarterback to be able to find consistent windows underneath in the red zone, that's really hard, right? Because the coverage stickier, you don't have to defend 60, 70 yards, so the safeties are closer. There's just not as many places to throw the ball. And so if you don't ever push the ball in the open field, right, then you are going to get those red zone defenses, and the entire length of the field becomes really difficult. Every yard to get is so difficult. And I think typically when you have a wide open offense, it's not as hard to go from your own 30 to the 50 or the 40-yard line. It's just those red zone defenses that tighten up because you don't have as many windows. You got to rely on running the ball a little bit more. You got to rely on your quarterback extending plays to find time to get those windows open. And so I think that they have just got to find a way to be able to open up the field and push it down the field, because going the long, hard way in the NFL is already hard enough. And then when you have to do it 4, 5, 6 yards at a time, it's just an impossible task to think that we can consistently go down the field and get scores if we can't get any explosive plays over the top. And the explosive plays can't always come from the run game because, as we mentioned, defenses are getting even tighter and closer towards the line of scrimmage and adding players. So your opportunity to hit those explosive runs are just not going to be there quite as much.
And you can't just throw it for the sake of throwing it, because I felt like the one time he actually did throw the ball vertically, he threw it into double coverage, and it was intercepted. It's got to be, it's smart, aggressive, and I think that's what Kevin Stefanski said. I don't know. When you watch the tape, there are a couple plays every game where Isaiah Bond, typically he's the one, is behind the defense, and it's usually not thrown to him.
You hit one, yeah.
Yeah, It's tough, and then you wonder, is that a quarterback issue? Is that a scheme issue? Is it a protection issue? Is it a receiver issue? Is it all of the above? And I think that's kind of the way that everything has been couched right now. But, as you kind of look at the final 9 games, one of the things that you wanted to at least have an idea coming out of the season is, do you have an in-house solution at quarterback? And it's either Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders.
Yep.
Or potentially now down later in the season, Deshaun, I guess.
Yeah.
So
if he's healthy, play him.
That's where you're at. So it almost feels to me like you got 9 games now. You've had 4 with Gabriel already. What does that look like? Does he have 1 more game, 2 more games, 3 more games? At what point do you say, okay, let's see now, this is either working or not. Let's see Shedeur now, working or not. Let's see Deshaun again. I don't know. Because you thought if they were going to make a change, to me, I would have felt like this would have been a natural time with the bye week, give Shedeur 2 weeks to get right. Now, we don't even know if he's healthy enough because he couldn't even be the backup quarterback against the Patriots with his back injury.
Right. No, I mean, it's
tough.
It has to get answered. And the thing that I think's tricky, Hoff, is like, Dylan's a 3rd-round pick, right? So if they thought he would be a franchise quarterback, you take him in the 1st round. He wouldn't be a 3rd-round pick. If you thought he could be that, like, that's such a huge disconnect. And exactly. I think sometimes there is this. The thing that's annoyed me a little bit with all of this is I think people are making it personal with Dylan as if he were Kenny Pickett, as if he were a former 1st-round pick who we brought in here to play at a certain level. He's a 3rd-round pick that you view as a long-term solution at backup and a guy who, maybe there's more to him, who knows, but we've seen him now for a few games. If they thought he could be the answer at quarterback long-term here, they would have taken him 5th overall or 2nd overall before we traded it. And Shedeur's a 5th-rounder.
Correct.
The whole league passed on him multiple times. So, like, you're not holding back Baker Mayfield here.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not what this was. You're not holding back the number 1 pick. And so that's the thing that's so tricky. And I think that's the other part, Hoff, and you've been in these rooms when you got these young quarterbacks. It's so hard on the vets. I mean, I think of Batonio. We talked about Myles already. I mean, all of that just makes this so difficult because you can do all your things individually, but then you're also trying to, like, bring a young quarterback along, and it's a tough spot.
It's a really tough spot because you feel like you're leaving a lot of plays on the field. You're handicapping your offense a little bit with maybe not throwing the football down the field. And I think that's the real question mark is, at what point do they say, hey, we've seen enough with Dylan Gabriel. We feel like we know where he is right now. And then now we got to answer the question for next season because we do have those 2 first-round draft choices, and we need to be able to see Shedeur at some point to get an evaluation on where he is. And I know that they want to make sure that he understands the offense well enough to be able to protect himself so he can get the ball out on time and that he's not running around and creating huge negative plays for his team, but also taking big hits on himself, which you don't want to see a player like that get hurt. And so you hope that at some point they feel comfortable enough and he's healthy enough and he understands the offense enough where he can start delivering the football on time and he can operate the offense efficiently so that we're able to get the other guys the ball as well to see what some of those other younger players, especially at receiver and, with Harold Fannin, what they can continue to do to develop. But I think you're right. Like at some point, there's enough frustration with the direction that the offense is headed within the team, right? The guys on defense that are playing great, the guys on offense that maybe are playing great football or good football, and they're holding up their end of the bargain where you say, hey, we need to make a change and figure out, what else we have here. And that if maybe a change does spark something on that offense to create something that a defense is frightened about and that can potentially open up some of the other guys. Because I look at a guy like Quinshawn, and who's done an amazing job. And I think he's been everything and more that you wanted when you drafted him. But it becomes more difficult for him each week that he's banging his head against a 7 and 8 man front because we aren't able to open it up enough. And so just having the threat of having a quarterback that is willing to throw the football down the field and hit some of our speedy receivers will really help him. And so I think the frustration from all those positions is kind of boiling up right now to the point where the question's going to get answered or get asked every single week about, hey, at what point do you put Shedeur in there and find out what he has and see if he can answer some of these questions and create an offense that's at least dangerous and unpredictable enough for a defense to give all those other guys that are out there an opportunity for success.
All right, trade deadline's coming up a week from today. Is that something that's talked about in the locker room when you're in a situation like we are right now? And you mentioned that there's some frustration. We know your story that you had an opportunity to go to Denver potentially. Is this something that's talked about? Could guys go and say, hey, give me a chance to compete? I don't have that many years left in the tank. How does that actually play out?
I don't think that specifically is talked about all that much in the locker room. I think the conversations in the locker room before a trade deadline are much more vibrant when it's, hey, we're right on the cusp of being a playoff team. There's an obvious need at a position. There's a guy out there that might fill that need. Hey, that's the conversation. Hey, are we going to bring this guy in? Who knows him? Let's talk to him. Let's see if we, can maybe persuade the teams and the player to make some type of a move at the trade deadline because we feel like we're one player away from being able to make a run and getting into the playoffs. I think the situation they're in right now where it's not like we're one player away on offense, and typically going into the trade deadline, there's not that many players that are available that potentially you could make a move for. And where the Browns sit in this situation of rebuilding and building for the future, it's not like they would give up a lot of draft capital for any certain player because it's not like that guy would move the dial enough right now to give up what you would need to be able to get that player in here. But much more of a conversation about like, hey, are the Browns going to deal some of the guys that we have right now that have draft capital and equity that aren't going to be part of the long-term future of this team? But I think those are more individual conversations that maybe a player would have with his agent that potentially would have with the team than something that would get talked about in the locker room.
Yeah, it's just got to loom. And we heard that report from Schefter a couple of weeks ago. He thinks it's going to be the busiest trade deadline, maybe ever in the NFL, and some big names. So you just never know. You never know, and I'm sure people will be calling us. I mean, we think of Joel, obviously, and you think at his stage in his career, and Hoff, you were in that circumstance. You know exactly, if that happens next week, you know exactly what that's like when you're being, and I'm guessing the same courtesy would be extended to him as was extended to you. Do you want this? What do you think? And that's a tough decision, I would imagine, to be in that spot and have that thrust upon you.
Absolutely, especially for a guy like Joel. I was in his shoes, not at the end of my career, but more towards the middle of my career. And he's been here in Cleveland his entire life. He never expected to go anywhere else. He re-signed here. He decided to come back for at least one more season, and he wanted to stay in Cleveland. And, how much does he value finishing his career in the place that he started? I don't know. I haven't had those conversations with him because the conversations I always had with him were never about like, hey, should I go somewhere else? It was more, hey, do I want to come back and play another season? I'm feeling like I'm getting older. My body's hurting a little bit more. Do I want to continue to do this thing that is so amazing and it's every kid's dream, but at some point it ends. But it is a tough conversation to have because obviously there's more people that have a stake in that say than just you and your agent and the team. It's like, you have a family, you've got a wife and kids, and they're deeply involved in the community. So the decision has a lot of layers, and you get thrust into this situation right before the trade deadline with a week or a few days to go, where it's like we got to be able to make a decision on this. So you hope that you've at least had a chance to talk to the important people in your life going into it, so you have a pretty good idea of like, is this something we feel like we want to go maybe finish somewhere else where they have a chance to make the playoffs and make a run and get a championship and get a ring? Or is it something where you'd rather continue to be here and help try to develop the guys around you and then find a different reason to play the game? Like for me, it was, towards the end of my career, I didn't want to be traded because I felt like we had a lot of good young players. I got to play with Myles at the end of my career, and I felt like, hey, I can be impactful from a leadership standpoint, from a mentor standpoint to a lot of these young guys to help maybe build a foundation for a great future, right? That was sort of my line of thinking in my last couple seasons. And you wonder where Joel's head is on that, because I haven't had those conversations with him.
It's going to be wild. And yeah, you're right. There are a lot of layers. A lot of people would be impacted, even if it is just a short-term thing, to go someplace for the rest of this year. There's a lot there. It's wild, and it stinks in large part. The AFC North is down right now, decidedly down, that we're even having these conversations, because unfortunately we sit at 2-6 and we've had opportunities. I mean, it comes out now that Carson Wentz beat us with one arm.
That's right. That's right.
Literally, like that is not exaggeration at all. And you say to yourself, man, if we could have just gotten that one, man, if we just made the kicks against Cincy, if we were 4-4 right now, 4-4, you're a half game out of first in the AFC North. And it's unfortunate that this is the situation that we're in, where you even have to even think about things like that. It's not a question, really. It's more just a statement.
No, but it goes back to what we were talking about. Baltimore's sitting there at 2-5 in the North. We
feel like they're going to win it.
And it feels like they're going to win it, Hoff. If you look at their schedule.
It's a really crazy year in the North, and I'm trying to reflect back. I mean, since I got in the league in 2007 till now, I can't remember a year where the AFC North just felt like it was so down. Obviously, a lot of it's been the injury to Joe Burrow, the injury to Lamar Jackson, the ineffectiveness of the Steelers' defense. It's things that, we just really aren't used to seeing in this division that's always so tough, the black and blue division of the AFC. And to feel like it was so wide open and really anybody's for the taking, it's frustrating. I mean, that's all you could say, right? Because if you told me at the beginning of the season, going through training camp, when we had Flacco at quarterback, that like, hey, if we were 500, we'd have a chance to win the division, I'd say, damn, I like that. I like our chances. I feel like pretty good with this great defense and with Flacco, veteran quarterback. Like, we're going to be able to squeak out some games. We can be right there at 500. So to sit where we are right now, it's just a bad feeling. It's frustrating. And then on top of that, you pile the fact that the AFC North is anybody's for the taking really right now. And there's no clear favorite other than, like you said, the Ravens, who are not
2-5,
looking very good themselves, but they know Lamar's coming back here pretty soon and they've got an easy schedule the rest of the way. You're going, man, what the heck? How did we get into the situation that we're in right now?
Let's do the Trench Report. It's brought to you by Big Fig, the mattress made for more, crafted in Cleveland, just like our Browns. We talked a lot about Myles off the top. One other thing, and you mentioned this on Monday's show, so I'm going to give you full credit on this, but he set the Browns single-game record, 5 sacks and a forced fumble, 6 tackles, 10 sacks on the season. He joins Reggie White and John Randall as the only players with 10 sacks in 8 straight seasons. He is also the most sacks prior to his 30th birthday. He's got 112.5. Yep. Reggie White at 108, Jared Allen at 105, TJ Watt at 101. So that's it. That's the list. You said something yesterday, though, that I want to get Hoff's take on, because I think this makes this statistic even more astonishing. How many snaps has Myles Garrett taken at defensive end where his team has a 2-score lead? Juxtapose that to Reggie White in Philly and then in Green Bay. Think about Jared Allen in Minnesota, who was on a lot of really, really, really good teams there. And think about TJ Watt in Pittsburgh, where all they do is have winning records every year.
Every year.
It's amazing. I mean, it's truly amazing. I think back to my own career and how much more difficult it was when you're playing from behind and you're in the 2-minute drill, and those guys on defense, they're pinning their ears back. They know one thing, like, hey, this is my chance to get sacks, to get the stats that I need, to get the contract that I want. And it is so tough because they're not playing the run. They don't care. They know where the quarterback's going to be. It's not like you're running boots and outside zone play action stuff. Like, they're just rushing the passer in one-on-one pass rush, which that is a drill that is set up for the defense to win. And that's when you look at, I would love for somebody in the analytics world to go over all the stats, all the sacks in the last 20, 30 years and figure out how many of those sacks came when the defense had the lead and it was the second half of the game and they were just able to pin their ears back and the offense knew they had to hold on to the football and they were willing to take a sack to risk being able to throw the football down the field to get a score. And the fact that Myles is getting the majority of these sacks in games that we're losing and the offense doesn't have to hold on to the football is just mind-boggling because it's so hard. You rarely ever see sacks when your team is in the lead because you just don't want to take sacks in those situations. You don't want the quarterback to get hit. You don't want the ball to go backwards. So typically you're running the football, you're throwing quick game, you're running play action stuff, and the quarterback's saying, hey, I'm just getting the ball out of my hand because we don't need to hold on to it and we don't need to score. It's just almost impossible for me to comprehend Myles getting the level of sacks that he's getting when his team is not winning.
Well, I know one of the things that the Pittsburgh people, when it was always Watt and Garrett, would be like, oh, TJ Watt's a closer and how his third and fourth quarter sack numbers were so great and Myles's weren't that great. It totally goes to what you're talking about in game script. But, you almost wonder, Myles probably has the most sacks in the first half of anybody like ever in terms of as a percentage of
That's
his
a
sacks.
great
And
point.
if you think if he was on a good team, like maybe you certainly should be able to extrapolate what he did in a neutral game script to the second half if he was on a good team. And you'd say, man, this guy could have been 20 sacks a year because he's going to be the only person ever to have 6 seasons in a row with 14 or more sacks, and doing that where he's had 2 winning seasons and then not just losing seasons, but significantly losing seasons.
Yeah.
That's why I said he's the most impactful defensive player, certainly that I've ever seen. And I know there's plenty of great arguments. I was a huge Reggie White fan growing up. Lawrence Taylor, obviously the guys from the 80s say that, he was unstoppable. He was a different player. But these guys are playing on Super Bowl teams, and they're getting one-on-one matchups, which if you're one of the great defensive ends of all time and you get a one-on-one matchup, you're going to win more of them than you lose. And for Myles to get sacks in the first half where he's getting double teamed, he's getting chips. It's so hard to win against a double team when you're the pass rusher. And it's so easy to win when it's one-on-one. And for him to win against double teams and chips, it's really mind-boggling because it just shows the level of talent and the level of invincibility that he has as a pass rusher and his desire to get to the quarterback.
All right, Hoff, we'll get you out of here on this one. Halloween Friday. Favorite costume as a kid, favorite candy. Or it could be something else that maybe there was a Wisconsin thing. I mean, there was a lady who made homemade chocolate glazed donuts that we were incredible around. We'd wait around the block to get them when we were little kids.
And
There's one lady.
You would never
accept
that
it.
somebody made in their home. You'd be
No,
like,
I
"What are you
know,
trying
but
to
I mean, we
poison me?"
did that.
I know, it was a simpler time. It was a beautiful
simpler.
time.
What do you got, Hoff? Best costume, best snack.
Yeah, best costume. I went, as a Green Bay Packer player one year as a kid, which was always really fun. One year I wore a ghillie suit and went as like a sniper in the Army. So I like that one. That was pretty fun. I think this year we're doing Mario Kart. So I'm going to be Bowser. Well,
Bowser,
there you go.
Yeah,
appropriate.
Bowser with the kids, which will be fun. And I think my favorite Halloween candy was always Whoppers, which was a very controversial choice because
That
I always
is
love
shocking.
that malted
malt?
milk ball and
Yeah.
that crunch in the inside. And some people hate Whoppers, which I'm okay with that. Give me your Whoppers. I'm cool. I'll give you the M&Ms and all those other things. But I was talking with Annie. I think what we're going to do this year is try to give a little treat for the parents as well. So we'll give the kids candy, and then we're going to have some Hall of Fame beef sticks to be able to get out to the adults, because
I knew you were
the
going to say
adults,
that.
they
I
like
was
to come
like, I
around
need to
with
go
a
there.
cooler of beer and, maybe a flask
Oh
under their
my
costume.
Which ones are you going to give them? Apple cheddar?
I mean, the
You
beef
gotta
sticks
give
are
'em- you gotta
unreal.
you got to give them the apple cheddar. Give the people what they want, Z.
You got to give them the apple
So
cheddar.
we're gonna have
that's like dessert.
a long line of return customers from the parents' side of the Halloween.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're like,
Friday.
I don't know if we got to that house.
Yeah, I don't think we
before.
got
Let's
that
run it
house yet,
back.
kids.
Mine was I had a real jumpsuit. I was Maverick.
Yeah.
From Top
Oh,
Gun.
nice.
That was my babies. And my favorite treat now is what he just said would be the apple cheddar meat sticks. But as a
Sure,
kid,
yeah,
I was
meat sticks. Yeah.
Snickers, Butterfinger, and Reese's Pieces. The
Yeah, I
original
like the
Reese's
Pieces better, too.
were
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah, those
Solid.
are great. All right, buddy. Enjoy the rest of the week. Thanks for your perspective and sharing, buddy. Always a good time talking to you. There it goes, the Joe Thomas half hour of the program, and there goes Cleveland Browns Daily. We appreciate you listening on 850 ESPN Cleveland.